Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Welcome to Strange Things, broadcasting from the Arkanasa Radio Studios in Laredo, Texas. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Once again, it just isn't a podcast without something strange happening on the soundboard today. Somehow, I don't know how, it got turned off. Not as in the app being turned off, but the volume was completely turned off. I didn't do it. All I can guess is one of the cats has been playing with things again. How do they know how to do this? Spooky. Anyway, tonight we're going to be talking about swamp monsters. Strange things seen in and around swamps. Lee County, South Carolina, June 29th, 1988. Chris Davis was just getting off of work. He'd been on the evening shift and he now had to drive home. His route took him through the Scape Ore Swamp. The road was narrow and bumpy, not very well maintained. As he was driving along, he ran over something that caused him to have a flat tire. Well, there's no traffic, so he just stopped in the road and got out to see about putting the new tire back on. He got the jack out and the spare, and then he got busy. The night was hot and humid, so he soon managed to work up a sweat. This seemed like a lousy way to end the day. Once he had the spare on and the flat was in the trunk, Chris took a look around just to see what was going on in the swamp around him. That's when he noticed how quiet it was. There are hundreds of creatures that call the swamp home, and they're usually a very vocal bunch. Something wasn't right. As he stood there listening, he picked up a faint sound from the road behind his car. It sounded like a rhythmic pounding, like something was running along the dirt road. It was too dark to see, but whatever it was getting closer. Well, Chris felt pretty uneasy, so he jumped in his car. He slammed the door, and then he had to step on the brakes so he could shift in to drive. As the brake lights lit up the road behind, he saw a thing coming at him from the dark. He noticed there were two bright red eyes that seemed to glow by themselves. The creature looked to be about 7 feet tall, and it was covered in green scales. By this time, it was right behind his car. Well, Chris hit the gas, wanting to get as far away from this thing as he could. His tires spun on the loose gravel. The creature jumped onto the trunk. Then it began pulling itself up onto the roof. Well, Chris tried driving as fast as he could. He would glance back, but he didn't see anything. That's when he noticed there was a set of claws grasping the molding around the windshield. Well, he tried going faster. At some point, the creature lost its grip and slid from the back of the vehicle. Driving as fast as was possible, he didn't slow down until he was in his driveway. He ran inside, slamming the door, hoping that whatever the creature was, it wasn't still behind him. The noise woke his parents. He told them his story, and I'll bet they didn't believe a word of it, if not for the look on his face. His folks decided that maybe they should just keep this to themselves. For the next few weeks, Chris felt uneasy anytime he had to drive through the swamp, especially anytime the sun was going down. He would look over his shoulder as if he was being chased by this monster. July 16th, 1988, Chris's dad was sitting in the living room reading the newspaper. That's when he decided it was time for his son to go see the sheriff. In the newspaper was an article telling about how a car had been attacked and torn up by some unknown creature. This car belonged to Tom and Mary Way. They lived just outside of Bishopville, South Carolina, near the swamp. The car looked as if something huge had tried to eat it. There were claw marks and teeth marks all along the sides of the car. So, Chris and his dad drove over to the Lee County Sheriff's Office to file a report about his earlier encounter with what soon would become known as the Lizard Man. Chris told the deputy what had happened, and if it wasn't for the report from the Ways, the deputy would probably have chased him out of the office. Over the next few months, more reports came in of vehicles being attacked any time the car was parked near the swamp. Each time, the cars were covered with what looked like bite marks. The molding was pulled loose and paint was scratched. There were holes everywhere that were about the size and shape of teeth marks. Some of the sheriff's deputies found tracks that they were able to cast, but nobody could say what had made them. They didn't look like any kind of a known animal. The tracks had 3 toes, and they were 14 inches long. Wanting to get in on the action, the local radio station, WCOS, went on the air offering a $1 million reward for anyone who could capture or kill the Lizard Man. Chris was the only witness so far, but folks hearing about his encounter all began referring to the creature by that name. Well, this promise of a huge reward began drawing hunters from all over the place, all heading towards Scape-Ore Swamp, with visions of becoming millionaires and famous to boot. It got to a point where the sheriff's deputies were having a hard time trying to keep things under control. Folks were driving around the swamp looking for the Lizard Man both day and night. Some would splash through the muddy water, looking for this creature. Everyone was carrying either a rifle or a shotgun. The citizens of Lee County were now having to watch for not only the Lizard Man, but overly zealous hunters who just might mistake them for being the creature. Couldn't find any reports of anyone ever being shot at by one of these hunters, but perhaps it happened and nobody ever bothered to report it. As more sightings came in, the probability of somebody hoaxing the situation would grow. The earliest reports are the ones you want to pay the most attention to. For some odd reason, there are always people out there that think it would be funny to run around and scare people. I don't think there could have been too many hoaxers because you still had all those people running around with guns all wanting to get that $1 million reward. But there are some people out there who just never stop to think what they're doing just might possibly get them killed. Well, the Lizard Man never was found, but the town now celebrates his visit by selling everything from T-shirts to Lizard Man burgers. In Australia, they have a thing called a bunyip. The bunyip is an Aboriginal word which means either devil or evil spirit. When European settlers first arrived down under, they encountered the locals who would talk about this creature that lived in the swamps, and it was feared and you should avoid it at all costs. The Aborigines were unable to give a clear description of what the bunyip looked like. It was supposed to look kind of like a crocodile, but it had the face of a dog. It lived in the water, but it could come out on land to hunt. To make matters just a little bit worse, each tribe had their own description of what the bunyip was supposed to look like. The creature was associated with the Murray River, which runs across the southernmost part of Australia. The bunyip appears to be nocturnal and does its best work creeping up on animals and humans in the dark. For this reason, Aboriginal tribes were frightened to go near any water holes, wells, swamps, and waterbeds after dark. On Fairy Creek near Victoria is a rock painting of what the Aborigines say is the bunyip, which has been redone over the years, so it still looks pretty fresh. The image is 25 feet long and about 4 feet high. The shape looks a little bit like a seal, and since seals have been found inland, maybe this was what the original painter had used for his model. Seals don't eat people, at least I hope they don't. I've seen people swimming with seals, but then I've seen people swimming with sharks. Well, as the story of the bunyip were passed from one person to another, it was hard to determine what was imagination and what was the real monster. Australia has so many weird animals, it isn't that hard to believe there might be some kind of an animal lurking in the swamps just waiting for dinner to walk by. The skunk ape is Florida's version of Bigfoot. It is mostly associated with Florida, but it has been reported in North Carolina and Arkansas. Most folks don't think Arkansas and swamps, but there are quite a few in the state, and they cover a lot of territory. Well, a large hair-covered creature that walks on 2 legs has been seen in and around Florida, Arkansas, and North Carolina for as long as people have been living in these states. The differentiating features of the skunk ape to a Sasquatch is it usually stands about 6 to 7 feet tall, and it smells, well, like a skunk. A lot of people think all Sasquatch sightings are accompanied by a bad odor, but actually it's only about 30% of the time. As for the skunk ape, if you've ever been deep in a swamp and you find a smell is everywhere. It's a combination of rotting vegetation, stagnant water, and dead animals all kind of mixed together, which gives a particularly strong aroma. The smell of the skunk ape is considered a consistent thing. Longears is a hairy, wolf-like monster of the Seminole legends. It is sometimes described as being on all fours, but it has been seen on 2 feet. The size of the creature has been described as being about as tall as a donkey. It has a head like a wolf or a dog and long, pointy ears. Well, a lot of Dogman sightings have been listed as being a Sasquatch, and quite a few Sasquatch sightings sound more like a Dogman or a wolf. Early European settlers had a run-in with the swamp ape back in the 19th century. A hunting party had set out looking for game in one of the swamps in Florida. During their trip, they ran into a creature covered in hair, which stood about 8 to 10 feet tall. This may have been an exaggeration since it was dark when they had their run-in, or maybe the modern-day reports are only of a smaller version of the same beast. The hunters were surprised by the swamp ape, and it killed a few members of the group. They managed to shoot the monster several times, which eventually killed it. Due to its huge size and weight, they abandoned the body, wanting to get out of the swamp as quickly as possible, not knowing if there might be more than one huge, hairy thing out there. The skunk ape got a lot of press during the 1960s and 70s. It was sighted in rural areas of Dade County. In 2000, several pictures surfaced showing what appeared to be a large ape-like creature lurking behind some bushes. A woman snapped off a few photographs before the creature turned and snuck back into the trees. She sent the photos to the sheriff's office, but didn't include her name. The creature was supposed to have been in her yard taking apples from a tree there. Well, the image does kind of look like an ape, and it just might have been an orangutan that escaped from a zoo, or it might be an actual skunk ape. The story of animals escaping from zoos or circus trains is used so often it would appear that zoos and circuses have absolutely no control over their animals whatsoever. November 2014, a woman was driving along Florida State Road 72 when she saw a Bigfoot or skunk ape on the side of the road. She said it looked as big as her car. It was covered in dark brown or red hair. It was on 2 feet as it moved into the brush. In 2018, a woman and her husband were driving on Long Creek Road at about 6:45 in the evening when she said she saw what looked like a large pile of Spanish moss on the side of the road. As she thought it was odd how the pile looked so formed. They were near Myakka River, which is where the photographs had been taken. As she looked at this odd pile of moss, it suddenly stood up, turned, and ran into the trees on the side of the road. As she described the animal as about 8 feet tall, a dark brown-haired biped with a pointy head, broad shoulders, and thin hips. Telling her husband she'd just seen a Bigfoot, he immediately turned the car around and went back to the spot. The creature had vanished from sight, and they didn't see any footprints. One of the most famous swamp apes of all time must be the Fouke monster that was the inspiration for the film The Legend of Boggy Creek. In 1972, a horror docudrama about the Fouke, Arkansas monster. The movie was based on the creature that had been seen in the Fouke, Arkansas area since the 1940s. Charles B. Pierce heard the stories while in Texarkana, and he borrowed $100,000 from a trucking company, and then he headed to Fouke to look into the reports. That $100,000 has generated over $20 million in profits. Well, Pierce showed up in town with a 35mm film camera, and he began asking questions. He would get the local kids to portray action scenes in the film. Keith Crabtree, dressed in a hairy suit, and he played the monster. My wife and I met Keith Crabtree in Jefferson, Texas at the Texas Bigfoot Conference back in 2017. For those two folks out there who don't recognize the name Crabtree, Smokey Crabtree was the Bigfoot hunter way back before Bigfoot was cool. He found an 8-foot-tall skeleton in Fouke, Arkansas area. He looked into sightings and reports, and he wrote 3 books on the subject. Well, Keith was Smokey Crabtree's son. The people are under the impression that once the movie was made, the creature disappeared into the swamps, but it has been seen dozens of times still running around in the Fouke, Arkansas area. The movie The Legend of Boggy Creek has been credited by being the inspiration for just about every Bigfoot researcher I have ever met. Even though it's been relegated to the drive-in movie group, it has gotten many people interested in looking for Bigfoot. I saw the movie in 1974 at a regular theater, but it was only shown as a matinee. If you go to Fouke, Arkansas, the one thing you'll notice is the huge Bigfoot creature on top of the Monster Mart. This is the local stop for all things to do with the creature. In 1963, Harlan Ford and Billy Mills were hunting in the Honey Island Swamp area in Louisiana. They walked up on something in the distance, and when they got a better look, it was a hair-covered creature standing over the body of a dead boar. They guessed the creature was over 7 feet tall, and it weighed 400 to 500 pounds. The hair was gray, and it had yellow eyes. It stood on 2 feet and walked away. Well, in 1974, Ford and Mills found a set of footprints moving through the trees. They cast them using plaster and found that the foot only had 3 toes with claws on the end of each foot. The creature gave off a nasty smell, kind of like the swamp ape. They'd also found a few dead boars that all had their throats ripped out. People just love to come up with weird explanations as to why these sightings may be taking place, and they try to come up with some really incredible legends as to what led to the creature being alive. Once more, that world-famous circus train that flipped the tracks, this time it allowed a band of chimpanzees to escape into the swamp. Now, these chimps had a thing for giant lizards, and so they mated with alligators, producing the Honey Island swamp monster. This has to be one of those stories that people tell while sitting around a campfire late at night and drinking way too much alcohol. Now, I do know for a fact there have been escaped monkeys in the Laredo area. While looking for folks in the country illegally, we were working out east on a ranch we called the Thompson, which isn't its name. I don't know why we called it the Thompson. No one I talked to could come up with a reason we called it by the wrong name, but that's how it was listed on the Great Unknown map. I have 2 copies of the original 3 maps. Can't seem to find the one from out east. Anyway, up in a tree near Highway 359, I thought I saw a bunch of monkeys doing what monkeys do. Well, I thought I'd been too long in the sun, and so I tried to convince myself they weren't there. It turns out that a truckload of monkeys en route to the Alice Monkey House for research had flipped, and the monkeys escaped. They were living in the mesquite on the ranch. Well, back to the swamp monster. Ford encountered 2 of the creatures swimming across the bayou one day. He was close enough that water was splashed on him as they went. He said they had a ridge of hair on top of their heads, and when they got out of the water, their arms hung down past their knees. After Harlan Ford's death, his granddaughter was going through his things, trying to clear out, when she came upon an old film canister. Inside was a Super 8 film. As she watched it to see if it was anything worth keeping. It showed a group of men out hunting in the swamp. They're standing around an old cabin. Then it shows a huge shape moving through the trees. It's kind of indistinct, but it looks human. Well, human-shaped anyway. The thing is on two legs and it moves through the trees way too quick to be a bear. Ford's granddaughter, Dana Hollyfield, used this footage in a documentary about the Honey Island swamp monster. She's also expressed confusion as to why her grandfather did not reveal the existence of this footage during his lifetime. Hollyfield has also written a book that features Ford's original writings, including a letter he wrote in the 1970s about his encounter with the creature. She has a website, the Honey Island Swamp Monster, and she's working on producing a new version of her original documentary. Ford's encounters with the swamp creature were featured on In Search Of, which brought national attention to the creature. The Honey Island Swamp Monster was featured on Fact or Faked. They tried to recreate the shape in the trees. One of the cast dressed in a ghillie suit, and then he walked around in the brush. They declared the swamp monster was a fake. Well, just because you can make something that looks kind of close to the original using thousands of dollars from Hollywood and film expertise doesn't mean the guy who originally made the film was faking it. I might have said this before, but the so-called film expert on the show was also a realtor on a different TV show. Just a thought. In the Hollywood mindset, they absolutely have to prove some things to be hoaxed in order to appeal to the skeptics out there. That's why Bill Burns from UFO Hunters was saddled with that guy Kevin Cook, who, no matter how compelling the evidence, he would always say he didn't believe it was a UFO. To me, the skeptics don't watch these shows, so why do they cater to them? Who in their right mind would be running around in the swamp dressed in a camouflage suit during hunting season? There are guys with rifles and shotguns all looking for anything that isn't human to bag and take home for dinner. Maybe there are a few hunters out there looking for a human, but that's another show called Cannibals. Had Ford asked somebody to dress up and run around in the swamp, who was this person? They've never come forward saying they were in on it. By the way, the number of folks who claim to be the guy in the Bigfoot suit on the P&G film is up to 13 now. That's got to be one crowded suit. If Ford had gone to all the trouble to hoax a creature film, why did he never release it? Why stash it away in his collection where it would only come to light after his death? Ford was convinced the swamp monster was real. He may have been working on producing more evidence, maybe some better film footage, and he died before he could put it together. I guess right about here would be a good time to say something about looking for answers on things like the swamp monster or the Bigfoot. I came across several websites where some expert made statements regarding investigators who they claimed were viewed as unreliable in the Bigfoot community or the UFO investigators. If you read the entry, you'd come to the conclusion that one or two or all of the investigators are, let's just say, less than honorable. Reading some of these reports, it sounds as if there is a huge schism between one side of the Bigfoot community and the other. It's us against them kind of thing. Well, I've met with some of the investigators who are supposed to be at odds with each other, bad-mouthing the other investigators to make themselves look good. The people being written about don't even know there is such a story out there, let alone whether it being true. Most of these folks get along very well. The only one bad-mouthing them are the skeptics who are trying to make a name for themselves. Keep in mind, you never make yourself look good trying to make the other guy look bad. This thing of disinformation has been going on for hundreds of years. They used to claim that Hitler had a Jewish grandfather, even though there was zero proof of this ever being true. I'm going to take a brief pause here and play a couple of commercials and drink some coffee, so don't go away. We'll be right back. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Back in 1776, someone said, "Give me coffee or give me death." And if that's how you feel, you should be at the Organic Man Coffee Tribe. They make coffee the right way, one delicious cup at a time. 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. Coffee, the stuff dreams are made of. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and you're not sure you're seeing Bigfoot or just your neighbor mowing his lawn, stop on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, just across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Did you hear a bump in the night? And you think it just might be a ghost? Contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. That's the LPRS for all your otherworldly needs. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. Call 723-3019. This is Arkanasa Radio you've been listening to. And welcome back to the show. In folklore, a will-o'-the-wisp, or Ignis fatuus, which is medieval Latin meaning fool's fire, it is atmospheric ghost light seen by travelers at night, especially over bogs, swamps, or marshes. Today it's called swamp gas. The phenomenon is known in English folk belief, English folklore, and much of European folklore by a variety of names, including the Friar's Lantern, Hinky Punk, Hobby Lantern, and is said to mislead travelers by resembling a flickering lamp or lantern. The term will-o'-the-wisp comes from a wisp, or a bundle of sticks or paper, used as a torch, and the name will meaning will of the torch. The term jack-o'-lantern, or jack of the lantern, originally referred to a will-o'-the-wisp. In the United States, they're called spook lights, or ghost lights, or sometimes orbs. Late at night, when folks were traveling through the swampy area, they would look for the light shining through the window, announcing there was an inn or other shelter nearby. When they would see a light through the trees, they would head for it. You've heard people say they'll keep a light in the window for you. If not, well, you're just too darn young. On many occasions, the traveler would follow the light, only to find he hadn't found an inn, but he was now lost in the swamp. Not a good way to spend the night. Mexico has two equivalents as well. In one, they are called brujas, which means witches. A folklore explains the will-o'-the-wisp to be witches who transformed into these lights. The reason for this, however, varies according to the region. Another explanation refers to the lights as indicators to places where gold or hidden treasure is buried, which can be found only with the help of children. And this they're called Lucas del Dinero, or money lights. Try that again, Luces del Dinero. Or Luces del Tesoro, which means treasure lights. The legend of John Lafitte, hidden treasure, says his ghost will stand near the treasure, holding an old lantern. The trouble is, if you go digging for the treasure, something bad just might happen to you. It's uncertain whether the ghost of John Lafitte is trying to show you where the treasure's hidden, or whether he's just showing off. And once more, it's time for a personal story. If you've lived for 60 years and you didn't spend your time under a rock, you'll wind up with a few stories as well. I used to live in Seabrook, Texas, right on and sometimes right in Galveston Bay. The place was low and it flooded a lot. One of the guys I knew was kind of into treasure hunting. He wasn't really good at it, but he had a lot of time on his hands, so he did some reading and researching. Jean Lafitte lived in Galveston Island, about 3 blocks from the port. When he finally got thrown out of the city, Lafitte was supposed to have sailed north from the island. Look at a map of Galveston and you'll see if you go north, you'll end up in Galveston Bay. Lafitte was supposed to have sailed into a freshwater channel. Now this sounds like Clear Creek. Seabrook is right at the mouth of Clear Creek. Following this channel would have taken him to Clear Lake. Once in a large freshwater lake, Lafitte said he went north into a small tributary. This could have been either Taylor Lake or Mud Lake. Lafitte had his treasure loaded into a bark, a small sailing ship, and he chained it to a tree and then sunk it. Well, this guy I knew headed out and began looking around both of these bodies of water for any signs of treasure. One day, he came back, claiming that he had found what looked like an old-style chain embedded into the trunk of a tree. The tree had grown, and the chain was now sunk into the bark. The chain, or what was left of it, led down into the water of Mud Lake. Unfortunately, this tree was located in Armand Nature Preserve. Now, this is state property. Well, he decided he was going to need help if he was going to get to the treasure. And he didn't want to run foul or get the attention of the authorities. So he told us his wild plan. We would slip into Armand Nature Preserve in the dead of night, then swim down to where he hoped the treasure would be. Armand Nature Preserve is full, and I do mean full, of alligators. Alligators eat anything they can get their teeth on. Those of us wishing to stay alive and not wind up either in trouble with the state or as a giant reptile dinner told the guy we were not interested in his misadventure. He called us some names I won't repeat, and that was the last time I recall seeing him. Did he ever sneak into the swampy area around Mud Lake and find Lafitte's treasure? I don't know. He probably never even tried, but like I said, I don't know for sure. It'd be just my luck the guy found the treasure and is now living as a millionaire out in Hawaii. The fire station I was assigned to used to back up on Armin Bayou, and late at night we could hear the alligators making their noises. They barked kind of like a dog. And on occasion we would get a call from some concerned citizen saying there was an alligator in their backyard. We would always ask the same question. Is the alligator on fire? If not, don't call us. Call the game authority. As for Lafitte and his treasure, he might have sailed into Trinity Bay and sunk his treasure near Dutton Lake or Lake Anahuac. Josh Gates from Destination Truth, or his other show, has gone looking for Lafitte's sunken ship there. And now back to the Will-o'-the-Wisp again. The swampy area of Massachusetts holds an area known as the Bridgewater Triangle. This triangle is known for all kinds of bizarre sightings and occurrences. People report seeing ghost lights moving through the trees at night. They've also seen what looks like a glowing mass moving around. The Bridgewater Triangle needs its own show, so someday I'll get busy and put one together. The fée follette of Louisiana is derived from the French incubus or succubus. The legends say that the fée follette is a soul sent back from the dead to do penance for some misdeed. Instead of performing penance, the fée follette attacks people for vengeance. While it mostly performs harmless, mischievous acts, the fée follette sometimes is said to suck the blood from children. Some legends say that it was the soul of a child who died before being baptized. Why do the folks living in Brazil speak Portuguese and the rest of South America speak Spanish? Back in the days of sailing ships and exploration and the New World had just been found, Portugal and Spain were the major world powers. The Pope was the ultimate authority, so to keep these two countries from going to war, in 1494, Pope Alexander VI declared that Spain would get the northern section of the New World, and Portugal would get the southern part. No one had bothered to map out the New World yet, and so lines were drawn on what was considered to be the world. It was just a landmass. Nobody knew what it was shaped like. They didn't know there was a North or a South America. So the Pope just drew a landmass on the map and then drew a line through it. He said, this is Spain and this is Portugal. No one had bothered to map the place out, so they didn't know. Well, Portugal colonized Brazil and Spain colonized the northern part. Eventually, England and France made trouble, and they took parts of northern section, pushing Spain down into what became Mexico, and then western parts of South America. Anytime we caught folks from Brazil, it opened a whole new can of trouble for us. We had to call a translator in order to do the interviews. An A file might take 3 or 4 hours, unless you're dealing with Brazilians. Then it was 6 to 8 hours of paperwork. This is what makes me so darn glad that I'm retired. One day, we caught 48 Brazilians, and it took 3 days to process them. Nothing but paperwork. Baitata is the Brazilian equivalent of the will-o'-the-wisp. The name comes from the old Tupi language and means fiery serpent. Due to its eyes glowing with bright fire, the serpent is mostly blind in the daytime. But at night, it can see in the dark. It uses this advantage to hunt for its favorite prey, people, and mostly their eyeballs. Just like those hollows from Mrs. Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. The legends say Baitata survived a great deluge or flood by hiding in a cave. After the flood had gone, the Baitata came out looking for food. With so many dead to choose from, it ate only the best parts, the eyeballs. By munching on only eyes for years, the Baitata developed glowing, fiery eyes. In Argentina and Uruguay, the will-o'-the-wisp phenomenon is known as the luz mala, or evil light. This phenomenon is quite feared and is mostly seen in rural areas. It consists of an extremely shiny ball of light floating a few inches from the ground. The light is made out of a toxic gas of decomposed bones which is fatal to humans. In the driest of seasons, it is said that the light is brilliant and comes from wisps of light as it extends outwards. It is said that this light makes a noise like a scream of pain and terror. The people say that the light comes to rest at the foot of a hill. There's treasure buried under the light. Only the bravest can find it, or they're foolhardy enough to go look. Some men who have supposedly followed the light and survived to tell about it said all they found were broken Indian pottery and human remains. In Colombia, La Candeleja is a will-o'-the-wisp ghost of a vicious grandmother. She was tasked with raising her grandchildren, but she never bothered to teach them right from wrong. The kids grew up to be thieves and murderers. In the afterlife, the grandmother's spirit was condemned to wander the world surrounded by flames. In Bengali, they have the alaya, or marsh ghost light. These lights are seen in the marshes along the coast and have been mistaken as the lights from the village by fishermen. When fishermen sail towards the lights, they wind up crashing into the swampland and dying. In other legends, the ghostly lights have been seen to guide fishermen back to their harbors. The light is supposed to be the souls of dead fishermen trying to help out their fellow man. The will-o'-the-wisp can be found in numerous folk tales around the United Kingdom, and is often a malicious character in the stories. In Welsh folklore, it is said that the light is fairy fire, held in the hand of a puka or puka, a small goblin-like fairy that mischievously leads lone travelers off the beaten path at night, and then when they're deep in the swamp, the light will be extinguished, leaving the traveler lost and alone deep in the swamp. Here lately, the image of fairies has become a childlike creature that lives in the forest and is kind and gentle. This wasn't the case of fairies back in the earliest times. They were nasty beings that would turn people into their slaves. They would also swap out their old sickly folks with babies, so the unknown parents would take care of the elder fairies, up until it died of old age. The parents would be left thinking their child had died from some mysterious unknown illness. These were known as changelings. Whatever you did, you were not to eat or drink anything offered by the fae folks or the fairies. Late at night, if you did see the fairy light or pixie light and knew what it was, you could follow the light and find a vast treasure hidden away in the forest. If you were lucky enough to survive dealing with the fairies who didn't take lightly to people coming into their lands. It's odd how the same legend can be found in such diverse locations. A pixie light is also associated with lambent light, which was the Old Norse idea that it was a ghost seen guarding their tombs. The will-o'-the-wisp was also known as the spunky in the Scottish Highlands, where it would take the form of a link boy. This was a boy who would carry a flaming torch to light the way for pedestrians in exchange for money. This light would always be seen just beyond your ability to catch up with it, and you could never quite see who was carrying the light. If you followed the light trying to catch up to the light bearer, you would wind up lost in a swamp. The spunky has also been blamed for shipwrecks at night after being spotted on land and mistaken for harbor lights. Other tales of Scottish folklore regard these mysterious lights as omens of death or the ghosts of once living human beings. This was kind of like what was known as wreckers. Not the kind that show up at your side whenever your car won't work. Wreckers would light a fire on the beach and confuse ships into thinking they were approaching a harbor. Once the ship came sailing up to where the fires were, they would wind up crashing on the beach. Then the wreckers would board the ship, kill any survivors, and steal the cargo. New Orleans sits in the middle of a swamp. Just about every major city sits where at one time or another there was a swamp. Cities are built where rivers meet, either the ocean or the Gulf. As the cities grew up, the swamps are drained or pushed back. The Grunch, also called the Grunch Road Monster, is a cross between a chupacabra and an alligator. Not living in New Orleans, I wasn't familiar with this creature, but it turns out it has been around for as long as Louisiana has been here. New Orleans had a major role of any city during the antebellum era in slave trade. Its port handled huge quantities of goods for export from the interior. Things like cotton and vegetables, as well as the import of goods from other countries to be traded up the Mississippi River. Ships couldn't sail up the muddy Mississippi, so everything had to be offloaded into warehouses and then shipped by flat-bottom boats such as paddle wheelers. The river was filled with steamboats and flat-bottom boats, all heading upland or downland, carrying cargo. In New Orleans, there was a huge community of free persons of color, mostly living in town. During the Civil War, the first all-black unit was in the Confederacy. The New Orleans, Louisiana Native Guard was formed in 1862. The Confederate Army used the Guard to defend various entrenchments all around New Orleans. A legend has it that the Grunch dates back to the days of New Orleans' earliest settlement and that the Grunch came from the name of the road. An old voodoo story says that Marie Laveau had delivered a baby whose father was the devil. Thinking she should end this creature's ability to create offspring, Laveau is supposed to have castrated the devil baby. As the testicles fell to the floor, they grew into two creatures, one male and one female. Okay, I am just going by what I've read. The testicle monsters grew rapidly and then attacked Laveau, trying to kill her. The woman was knocked to the floor unconscious. When she awoke, the devil baby and its parts were gone. She is said to have given up voodoo on that time, but that's hard to believe. Marie Laveau made a good living dealing in voodoo, and she was well known and respected in the community. These monsters are supposed to have grown up and produced the Grunch. The Grunch is a goat-like being with leathery or scaly black-gray skin and sharp spines with long horns or quills running down its back. Sounds kind of like a chupacabra. The creature stands about 3 or 4 feet tall. They are also said to seem more intelligent and have human-like skills, able to open doors, use tools, kind of like how a monkey or a primate would. The Grunch will howl like a wolf, or scream like a banshee, or bellow and screech like an ape when it's alarmed. It is usually accompanied by a strong smell, just like the skunk ape. The eyes glow in the dark, either a reddish orange or kind of a bluish green. On a few occasions, the Grunch is seen with a small wings on its back, which are more decoration than utilitarian. The skin is glossy or gray, but sometimes it's covered with spiky fur. The Grunch kills its prey by draining all the blood and sucking out some of the internal organs through a single small hole. A Grunch Road was located in the remote part of eastern New Orleans, near the community of Little Woods. Most people run into this obscure road only by accident. It's in East New Orleans off Haynes Boulevard. I couldn't even find it on a map. Oddly enough, there were a few small streets on the map without a name. It's a dead-end road made from shell and sand. Huge oak trees grow over the road, making it shady and dark even in the daytime. Even today, there are stories coming from the neighborhood about strange goat people who live in and around the road. At night, howls can be heard coming from the trees on either side of the road. The people have reported seeing the Grunch running around at night on the Eastover Golf Course, which is close to the Grunch Road. The creature's also seen out in the swamp surrounding New Orleans, places like Slidell and Lakeview and Metaria and Chalmette. Or is it Chalmette? Darn French words, they're hard to pronounce. Too many letters. Also from Louisiana is the rougarou. This is a degenerated version of the original French loup-garou, which means werewolf. In French, the word loup means wolf, while garou means man. As people moved around, their pronunciation of words would change as they combined with local dialects. The name Cajun started out as Arcadian. In the Cajun legend, the creature is said to prowl the swamps around Arcadiana. Too many letters once again. Darn French words. Yes, my grandfather was French. No, nobody in the family speaks French. Part French, part German. Anyway, Arcadiana and Greater New Orleans. It would also hunt the sugarcane fields and the woodlands as well as the swamps. The rougarou most often is described as a creature with a human body and the head of a wolf or dog, similar to a werewolf. Then there are the Dogman sightings, which are probably the same creature only called by a different name. The Rougarou is supposed to either hunt down folks who do not observe Lent, or the Rougarou is the curse placed on these folks who fail to observe Lent for 7 years in a row. A common legend says the Rougarou is under the spell for 101 days. After that time, the curse is transferred from person to person when the Rougarou draws blood from another human. During that day, the creature returns to human form. Although he will be sick for several days, he refrains from ever telling anyone what has become of him because he's afraid they'll kill him. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Tell everyone you know to give a listen to Strange Things. Maybe they'll thank you with a cup of coffee or something. All the archives are on YouTube, but they're not in any kind of an order. That's my next weird project, trying to sort things out. The new book is coming along. Right now it's called Fort McIntosh and the Paranormal. That's what's known as a working title. If things work out, I'll keep that one, and if not, I'll let you know. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man the same murder 3? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?